no.
Takanyora pama-invites kuti mask no entry handika biza mask
saka wauraunyadzisa ndiani panapo uda kuti tizoti tiri korona isu let's make a toast. First thing ndinoda kuti happy birthday minister. She turned 60 years. 60 years nasi. I think it's been a good year. 2020 has been a good year for all of us. Mnesari panapa. Takakuboma dire mingi ema maski. Unobatwa nemnanzi chingono ufumura iziterero kuti chingono.
Aiwa, kutaura na honorable.
Saka, but otherwise I'm happy to be here. I'm not drunk yet. All night. Farad, Pembera minister, 60 years. But overall, I think if you are here, it means 2020 was your year. It was my year. I know complain on the well, but 2020
one more reminder, zekuza kwenyu next week tiri kuda kumbowauza kuti pamwe pane second wave yecovid saka tombodzosa pamwe kefi kumashure. I think toti vanhu 50 kana 100 pagathering 50 ndo ine power.
Iwe ivavo ndivo. Tikana 100 timapresa tinokusunga ivo.
Yeah, not that one 100 pagathering. No, that will be fine. And then tongoti mask tichivarisa zvinhu nemabhurisa. I think it will work if we do that.
Thank you, Minister, for inviting us.
Absolutely.
We love you. Personally, I love you. Give me a hug, Minister. Give me a hug. I love you personally.
My people, comrades and friends, welcome to another episode of The Week with me, Comrade Fatso. And it's been a super spreader week. Apparently, Mbuya Nehanda has been doing squats during lockdown. Mutsvangwa said that COVID regulations are just for you broke people, and Kuda Tagwireyi got himself a bank. As you do. We also caught up with inspiring activist Namatai Kwekweza. But first, this.
Tikasemuka Mbuya denga upindi nokuti iye Jesu akati kudzani baba namai mazuva ako agowedzegwa uinde kudenga.
Yes, if you don't honor Mbuya Nehanda, you will not enter heaven. Never mind the fact that Mbuya Nehanda didn't exactly believe in all that heaven stuff. But yeah, there's been a big controversy and noise around the Mbuya Nehanda statue recently. Most of the noise has been from the fact that this whole shrine is being built while there's a pandemic raging the whole world over. A pandemic that has crippled economies in the global north. But no, our clairvoyant Hurmend decides to use millions to build a statue of Mbuya Nehanda. The most recent noise, however, has been because this shrine looks nothing like Mbuya Nehanda. Well, at least the Mbuya Nehanda that we've seen in the photos. So Twimbos went wild. Not Mbuya Nehanda, fellas. It's Auntie Nehi. Mbuya Nehanda joined Herbalife. Nehanda the stallion. That's not what Nehanda looked like. Toto waje kwa muri im makakura naye. To whoever got the tender to make this, we asked for Mbuya Nehanda, not Mbuya wako. In all the memes and jokes surrounding the statue, some very important opinions and questions were raised by young people. The one that stood out the most was this one from Leroy Zenga, a young journalist who wrote, "Art is seen as a medium of justice. Even if we may never get compensation for the strife we endured during colonialism, we can at least pay homage to central figures in our struggle through the best elements of their existence. Would you want to be remembered with an image taken as your enemies were sentencing you to death?" He concludes his argument by saying, we can represent Mbuya Nehanda in her freshness. She was at one point full of life too. In my opinion, that is a better memory to preserve than the unfortunate depiction of settler sadists. You can read the full post on his Facebook account. Leroy Zenga. Whatever your feelings on this matter are, is it not exciting when young people are engaging with national matters on this level? Let's ask the questions. Let's have the debates. I mean, none of us knows everything, but together we can find those answers. Ahoy, my comrades. Damn, that was deep, wasn't it? Just call me Fatso. Remember those COVID regulations? No parties allowed, no gatherings of more than 50 people, nighttime curfews. Well, it turns out they only apply to you, the povo. Or maybe some animals are more equal than others, because Information Minister Monica Mutsvangwa hosted a lavish 60th birthday party over the weekend. There was lots of hugging and breathing in each other's faces and not a mask in sight. When she was quizzed about it by the press, Mutsvangwa said, "That was obviously a very personal dinner. A small gathering where a few friends were just there for dinner. The same way ZANU-PF redefined the words patriotism and sovereignty, they now want to redefine the word small. At least have the decency to coordinate your lies, because from the photos that Nick Mangwana posted, it looked a bit more like an intimate rally." And to show you that it wasn't against the law, the Hurumend have quickly introduced a new regulation that you can have birthday parties with up to 100 people. Hooray! I think we should call it the Mutsvangwa Law. Unfortunately, the Bulawayo Arts Awards that happened on the same weekend as Mutsvangwa's birthday didn't have the same luck, and cops came on stage and shut them down just before curfew. One rule for some, another rule for others. Merry Christmas, Zimbabwe. During this period of the 16 days of activism, we decided to catch up with the inspiring young activist Namatai Kwekweza, who's been in court this week for her fight against the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2.
Comrades and friends, welcome to a very special interview. We're joined here by the activist Namatai Kwekweza. Namatai, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really good to be here.
So Namatai, we see you on Twitter, on the streets, always protesting, and especially protesting against this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. And now, are you paid by our Western detractors to try and bring about regime change? Because that's what it seems.
Okay, so interesting question. I think maybe I'll come from a place where I say that, that narrative of people being in the notion of assuming that activists are somewhat sponsored or paid or coached to do what they do is something that the state has been so good at weaponizing, against people who are actually active and vocal around issues that are happening in the country. We don't need to get paid to see that, the Constitution is being amended without the consent of the majority of Zimbabweans in this country. We don't need to get paid for us to know that there's no water or electricity, or that there's no, there are no doctors in the hospital. So those are things that we can actually see and we can think. And I think that for people to be thinking that every time people stand up and they are standing up for something in their country, they're paid, I think that's a very ancient way of thinking, and that is not something that should be perpetuated. That's something we have to really stand against. Yeah.
Okay, but you're in court at the moment. I mean, you're just coming from court. You've been in court this week. Now, you're in court for promoting public violence. You're only 22 years old, comrade. What is inspiring this activism? Are you not scared of Chikurubi?
All right, so yes, the charge is participating in a gathering with the intent to promote public violence. And I pleaded not guilty on Tuesday when we were in court. To be honest with you, I would actually want to then say that, it's not that we're not scared. I think that going to Chikurubi is a very unpleasant thing. Being arrested is a very unpleasant thing. Being followed around is a very unpleasant thing. But what we have to be cognizant of the fact, that it's important for people to remain active. Because sometimes you are dealing with, a regime that already has 2/3 of parliament on their side, basically. And people will ask you questions like, so what's the point? Because the bill will still go on anyway. And we always say that, people like Mbuya Nehanda are not, remembered for having succeeded. They're remembered for having tried. And because they were trying, it inspired a whole new generation to fight on, and that's the generation that succeeded. So if this constitution becomes messed up, it should be on record that there are people who tried and say that this is not the way it's supposed to be. And even if it doesn't work out in our time, at least those who come after us will know that as long as you keep on pushing, something good would definitely come to pass.
You mentioned Mbuya Nehanda. What are your thoughts on the Mbuya Nehanda statue? There's been this big controversy over the past week. What are your thoughts on that statue?
Okay, great. So I personally think that one of the problems that we have, particularly in the context of how history is narrated to the young people, is that it's very politicized. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that it's very patriarchal. It's a very patriarchal process. So if you hear the outrage, I think when people are on social media, it might appear as though people are joking or they're trying to be funny, but they're raising some very crucial issues in the context of what they're saying on social media. For instance, her image, her body, if you look at the images of her, of the pictures that actually exist of her, and you look at the statue, there's a very, big difference in the context that the statue seems a bit more sexualized, exaggerated, woman's features, etc. But that's not a true reflection of who she was as a person. And I remember reading a particular article by some ZANU-PF person who highlighted that the reason why they, made her bigger, was because they seek to glorify her and to, pass off this image that she was a strong, and they're trying to depict her as younger and full of life and stronger. But I personally actually stand, with the contrary, to say that there would have been nothing wrong having an accurate image. That looked a bit sickly and old, because what it's basically telling us is that people that might on the outside look, frail and old and sickly can actually inspire something big. And it's something that people can relate with, to say that it's not the external frame that matters, but actually the spirit within the person. So I think that, it's a big conversation around issues to how our history, is being narrated and documented. And also a big conversation around patriarchy and the fact that, it's probably a man who made that statue, and he was just, portraying probably his fantasies of what a powerful woman like Mbuya Nehanda must have looked like.
No, I completely agree. I think, I'm very inspired by, that early activism of Mbuya Nehanda, and I don't think there's any reason to Kim Kardashianify her body. And I think it's a big problem with patriarchal society, is objectifying women's bodies. Which brings me to the period we're in now. It's December. It's, the period of 60 days of activism against gender-based violence. You're very vocal around that. What does this period mean to you?
Absolutely. So, this 15 days of activism, against gender-based violence, I think I just want to start at a point where I make it very clear that, this period is very different, particularly in 2020. Because we were in a global health crisis with the COVID-19. All the countries in the world went at a lockdown at different intervals. And because of the lockdown, the number of violence, the number of cases of violence against particularly women has increased. And not just women, even men have suffered too. And I think that it's very important for us to be cognizant of the fact that we need to actually reignite our passion, and particularly the conversations around gender-based violence, because COVID-19 is not yet over. And we have a situation where most of these things are going to go on, and when we have another lockdown because of the economic suffering, it's usually women who will suffer the most. So I think that particularly in the context of 2020, and particularly majoring on the aspect that there was the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a very big conversation that must also be held in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the imminent lockdowns that we've actually seen happening.
Right. So, Namatai, now we're going to get into some multiple choice. Saka either or, okay? Easy questions, either or. Pablo's or Mashwede Village?
I would have to go with Mashwede Village.
On the youth side of things, right. Peri peri chicken or Maguru?
Peri peri.
Would you rather be stuck in an elevator with Nick Mangwana or have to swim across a crocodile-infested Limpopo River?
I would actually swim across the Indian Ocean if I had to. Yeah.
Shots fired, comrades, shots fired. Okay, now we're onto another question. How would you describe the color red to someone who is blind?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I would maybe, because they're blind, I would appeal maybe to their active senses, like maybe the sense of like they can feel, right? So I would say maybe the color red is warm. It's passionate. Think about it like in the context of when you're angry, when you're feeling confident, bold, strong and powerful, or when you maybe like have something that's spicy in it. I think that's how I would appeal to their active senses. Yeah.
Okay, you wouldn't just say to them, color your opposition.
No.
Okay, that's how I do it. Okay.
Okay, that's actually pretty simple. Good idea. Yeah, good idea.
Color your CCC. So another question. If you were given 5 minutes alone with the president, Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, what would you say to him?
I would say to him, stop abductions. I think that would be the first issue. Respect human rights. Don't amend the Constitution. I would also say to him that he is ruining our future. I mean, him and his squad, basically. That whole generation of people have ruined our future. And that I think, you know, in time, in due course, when we do have the opportunity to write history, we'll document things as how they happened. Because they have stolen so much, not just from our generation, but also the generation of our parents. That's what I would say.
So you've probably still got another minute left with him. Would you also ask him, was that his handbag that went through the airport by mistake that Henrietta took?
Okay, so I think maybe that's a bit obvious. So I think that there would be nothing to ask there except just to say that you know, when we are not focusing on mineral resource governance and we are looting resources that are meant, you know, for the people of this country, and we sell them off for very little money so that we, you know, get instant cash, you know, we blow it up. I would just call that, like, you know, that's ludicrous. So it's very obvious what was happening there, and I wouldn't need to verify if the bag was his or not because I think it's quite obvious what was happening there. Yeah.
Okay, hypothetical question. Namatai, your best friend gives you a 600-kilogram elephant named Shadrach. You cannot give it away or sell it. So what do you do with the aforementioned Shadrach?
All right, so my enterprising self is saying that I would actually use him to make more money. So probably like rent him out during weddings, or like get people to come see him like he was like some really cool tourist attraction, you know. So I think that I would actually use him to make a quick buck. And besides, he is like 600, you know, kilos. I need to feed him, so at least he has to work for his meals. So yeah, I think that's how what I would do with.
You would put Shadrach to work.
I would make him work. Yes, yeah.
You'd give him some days off and you know, weekends.
No, but if it means that we lose money during that time, he wouldn't have. No, I'm joking. Animal rights, yes, definitely.
Animal rights, comrades. Yes.
Absolutely.
No, so stay tuned, comrades. You'll hear about Shadrach, the hardest working elephant in the whole of Harare, very soon. Just follow Namatai on Twitter. So, Minister Monica Mutsvangwa recently held a very lavish 60th birthday party in spite of all COVID and lockdown regulations, not a mask in sight. What do you have to say to that about a young person who has to deal with these lockdown regulations on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I would actually say that I think it's pretty ludicrous how you know, our public officials you know, do not lead by example. You know, I remember during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, you'd hear stories like, you know, in countries like Britain, if one of the public officials did not adhere to the, you know, COVID-19 regulations, some of them had to resign. You know, something as simple as I just drove from this part of town to the other part of town. Someone had to actually, you know, step down from office because of that. So I think that it just, you know, serves to help us see, you know, that, you know, we are being led by people who can't lead by example, and they feel entitled and they feel that they should be exempted from certain kinds of things that everyday people have to go through. I would actually say maybe just for them to learn a lesson. It's not something that you'd wish on anyone, but, you know, if maybe one person had just sneezed, so that they just learn that it's very important, you know, to stick to COVID regulations, because COVID is real and it's not a good thing for anyone to ever actually get COVID. So I would say if one person had just sneezed, so that they learn their lesson, you know, don't hold parties during COVID-19, and make sure that you social distance, you wear your mask, And you make sure that, especially when you're a person of influence, when people see you, they have to actually, see that you are living up to what you're telling them to do.
Yeah, no, it seemed like Nick Mangwana was having a fantastic time just taking selfies, and it was hugs all around. It's good to see those comrades. I mean, they might be tough on the exterior, but amongst each other, very huggy, chummy kind of people. So you often, you and activists like you often accuse our president and those around him of corruption. But I mean, look, the guys, Aruptraya, think, they've arrested Delish Nguaya, they arrested Priska Mpumira. I mean, they might be out now, but at least they went into the courts. So, I mean, don't you think Aruptraya, maybe there's just criminals around him, but is our regime really corrupt?
Right, so I would actually say that as long as people like Hopo Chimono are still experiencing the amount of torment and the amount of abuse that they go through for exposing corruption, then he hasn't even done anything that matters. Hopo spent more time locked up than any of the people that you've mentioned for exposing their corruption. And yet those people were cosmetically arrested, and they were eventually released. I remember, when I got arrested for the first time and we went to court, that was around about the same time Obadiah Moyo got arrested. And we were coming from Harare Central cells. It was a very, very horrible experience. And he was coming from his big, nice, it was a wonderful car. And he looked good, and he even smelled good. I mean, he, like, when he walked past you, he's like way over there, you could still smell that, oh, he was here, because that's the kind of treatment that those people get. They get a very special kind of treatment. So I would actually say that in the fight against corruption in this country, as long as there are a lot of good journalists like Hopewell, very thorough with the investigations, they even had exhibits, they even had receipts, they even had invoices, and they're showing them to the public. I mean, it's so clear what has happened here. And some of the stuff is being traced back to the president's children. It's being traced back to, all of those people who are very, very closely related to the president. You get the sentiment that all of that is just cosmetics to deflate attention from where we should actually be looking. If we had seen any of his sons being arrested for looting COVID resources, because they're basically killing us. If we go to a hospital that does not have the very bare minimum, it means that we're going to die there. So in a way, they're actually committing mass genocide. I mean, just go, to public hospitals and see what it looks like. But they were looting more than 60 million USD worth of COVID resources. So I would actually say that as long as people like Hopo Chimono are being arrested for exposing corruption, as long as no one has bothered to directly question, the involvement of the first family, particularly his sons, and all of these shenanigans and scandals that have been happening, you get the sentiment that it's all fun and games. It's really just one big fat joke, and it's just basically cosmetic. And you can't really blame them. I mean, if we really wanted to have an honest and candid conversation around corruption, the president himself would probably need to step down.
Okay, so you talk a lot about what you see as wrong with Zimbabwe. So what would be your vision of a new and better Zimbabwe? What is that vision that's driving you? Absolutely.
I would actually say that it's very, very important for us to build a society that allows the list of our members to get the very basics. I think the standard, the benchmark or the hallmark of any kind of leadership in any society is the stuff that we see in the context of the least members in their communities. If the poorest member in our country was able to get healthcare, just basic standard good healthcare, if they had a good and functional, transport system, if they had water and electricity, if they could, afford to send their kids to school, even have free education for their children. I mean, this is the least member in our community. I would actually say that's a great Zimbabwe. Inversely so, if we had, public systems that even the people in positions of power were comfortable using, that would be the ideal country. So I would actually say that the true question of what a good Zimbabwe would look like, it's a Zimbabwe in which the president would be comfortable going to a public hospital and getting healthcare. politicians, MPs, ministers would be comfortable, bumping into you in a Zupko, because the standard of what is a Zupko is really good. If you are, not comfortable using, the services that you have given to the ordinary citizen, but you expect them to use those services, it means that you're doing a pretty bad job. It makes no sense that if the Minister of Health, currently I'm sure that's Chiwenga, if he gets sick, you won't see him at Paririnyato, you won't see him at Goma Hospital. He'll probably be flown, off to Beijing to get healthcare. So, what are you a minister of? So, when we get to that point where the list of our members, have access to the fundamentals, because those are human rights. And when we have a situation where, the highest officers are comfortable using, public systems and public services, then we know we have a good country. I think I'll just throw in one final thing there. An ideal and new Zimbabwe for us would mean that people do not, get arrested, beaten up, abducted, raped for having, an opposing, political orientation, to the ruling government. Doesn't matter what party it is, but I should be able to say, to the president, excuse my French, and not wind up in some horrible situation. I should be able to call the president out, to call the ministers out, for not doing a good job, and not wind up in some desperate situation somewhere.
So thank you so much for joining us on the show, Namatai. Keep fighting the good fight, keep inspiring the youthies, and thank you for coming through to the week.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me. I think the questions really got my brain taking a jog, because I just thought to myself that it would be simple, but this is one of the most difficult yet intriguing interviews I've had. So thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, good. No, we like to keep it real, and we like to keep comrades guessing. So thank you, and Futsek.
It's Christmas time. And while most of us are going to be pretending that we didn't know there was actually Christmas this year, Kuda Tagwireyi went and decided to get himself an early Christmas present and got himself a bank. Yep, he's taken over ZB Bank. Now that's what you call my big moves, big boss things. All of you saying, hey, corruption, hey, what, I'm with my haters. Former Finance Minister Tendai Biti has described it as a bank heist, as it goes against the provisions of the Banking Act. Because last year, Comrade Command Agriculture acquired a 30% stake in CBZ, so his latest acquisition solidifies his grip on the banking sector. BT tweeted, "This is a bank heist. Kuda Tagwireyi acquired a major bank in 2019 through purchase of government shareholding in that bank. Now he has acquired ZB Bank against clear provisions of Banking Act, against multiple bank ownership. Now target is First Mutual. Unprecedented looting. I honestly want to know where this obsession with owning everything comes from. What do you even do with two banks? Run around naked wearing a ZANU scarf in the corridors while withdrawing willy-nilly from the ATMs? I mean, what's he going to get next? RBZ? State House? Oh, okay, sorry, he already owns that.
Hey, Comrade Kuda, tutengesa kama Gamba TV, mari.
Shut, tonight, Sadaro, shut. Huh? I mean, what do you think? We're not Alpha Media Holdings.
Nyakasikana. Nehanda.
Yep.
Njani?
Kundini se.
Iwe. Wakazodai sorini kwewe.
Sha andora manchuku zoti hande ku gym, anoneta ma squats, but yone ngochiramba kuya.
Hayi, musandijairire man, mandikropa.
But you idoiswa patch, awuna kana six pack. Awuna kana six pack udoiswa udofeature say.
Handina six pack nini? Handina six pack iwe ichichi.
Six pack haidi kudatsinga zvekudara zvidi zvekuzotenza too much.
Abudatsinga dyani?
Ona awuna kana V, hapana zvekuratidza vanhu apa, hapana zvoda social media zvoda zvine moto.
Boys haisi fair.
But engo yacho yakapenga. I look good.
Anzi Nehanda nakatikana.
Yeah.
Boys ka apa mapfupa angu anomuka apa.
Yeah.
Apa uchazisvikira apa pa. Apa vanhu vakusvika vega. Ndikukudzai. Ndianakaita sini. Ndianakaita sini.
Sha nditongokudza kuti maybe hande ku gym andika ngatite hande masquats ukatangira ipapo katozoenda kuma ab crunches unogona kuti uzongotsvagwawo. It's possible.
So
Everyone's favorite finance minister, well, you don't have much choice, 2% Ngube, announced the national budget last week. You want a summary? Well, it was anti-poor and pro-elite. The 421 billion Zim dollar budget plans to tax the informal economy and target small businesses for payment of tax in Mayusa. To show that it's truly anti-poor, 2% has basically banned the Honda Fit. Yes, he announced a ban on importing cars that are over 10 years old. That's how you show that you've never been in Mshika-shika, Comrade Dr. Oxford, PhD, Chichichi. So goodbye to working class people's dreams of buying an affordable car, and goodbye to pirate taxis. But of course, the Mbingas from North Zamora can still import their brand new Lamborghinis. This week, Zimbabwe's COVID-19 cases surpassed the 10,000 mark. At the same time, there's been a gathering COVID-19 storm brewing in schools, with over 400 school kids infected nationwide. Yet still, the Hurumende is determined for ZimSec exams to go ahead this week. Rural Teachers Union Artuz has said they will not invigilate the exams because of non-payment of invigilation fees to teachers, lack of teaching time, and the surge in COVID cases. I mean, what is our Hurumende thinking? National Tree Planting Day is commemorated each year on the first Saturday of December. This year, we urge you to contribute to the Zimtree Nursery fundraising initiative. Zimtree is aiming to re-green and re-wild urban spaces in Zimbabwe, making them more beautiful and extracting more carbon from the atmosphere. Initially, they started with 1,000 trees planted across Harare. Now, they want to grow 5,000 seedlings of their own to make Zimbabwe's cities more beautiful and more green. To find out more about this initiative and how you can contribute to this really great cause, go and check out the Zimtree Go Get Funding site. Thanks for joining us on the week. Follow Magamba TV on social media. I have been Comrade Fatso. You have been the people. This has been the week. Magamba TV is not for sale at the moment. Thank you and Futsek.